And now the FBI has confirmed it. They've found the very gun that took Charlie Kirk's life. This discovery doesn't just add a twist to the trial, it could change everything we thought we knew. Shocking updates on Charlie Kirk's case. On the morning after Charlie Kirk's assassination, investigators from local police, state authorities, and the FBI scoured the wooded areas near Utah Valley University. Today, at approximately 12:20 Mountain Standard Time, political influencer Charlie Kirk was shot in an event at the Utah Valley University. He was taken by private vehicle to Timpanogos Hospital, where he later passed. At the press conference, Utah Department of Public Safety Commissioner Bo Mason confirmed the worst fears. This wasn't a random act of violence. Charlie Kirk, he declared, was deliberately targeted.
We have full resources devoted to this investigation, including tactical, operational, investigative, and intelligence. To be clear, the FBI will fully support and co-lead this investigation alongside with our partners.
They were convinced the shooter had abandoned evidence. What they uncovered would not only link the crime to one man, but also reveal the chilling story of how an antique weapon became the centerpiece of a 21st century assassination. Beneath branches hidden hastily, they recovered a Mauser Model 98 bolt-action rifle chambered in .30-06 caliber, a weapon first designed more than 100 years ago. This wasn't just any rifle, prosecutors later confirmed. It had belonged to the grandfather of the accused assassin Tyler Robinson and had been passed down as a family heirloom. It was a relic of world wars, lacking a serial number and therefore untraceable. For investigators, this explained why Robinson may have chosen it. An old gun with no paper trail, nearly impossible to track under modern firearm laws. Yet Robinson's plan faltered almost immediately. The towel he wrapped the rifle in carried his DNA. A screwdriver discarded nearby also bore his genetic traces. And most damningly, his DNA was found on the trigger itself, the bolt, and even the casing of the fired round. The very weapon he thought might disappear into history ended up testifying against him. From the rooftop, investigators also found physical traces of his presence. A rare elbow print, an impression from where Robinson lay prone to aim his shot, was captured with advanced 3D scanning technology. Though less distinctive than fingerprints, it corroborated surveillance footage that showed him crawling into position. Footprints and palm prints were collected as well, forming a trail of impressions leading from the rooftop to the woods. Surveillance video confirmed his movements, capturing him fleeing, dropping an item consistent with the rifle, and later changing clothes. But beyond the science was the raw human cost. Kirk had been standing before nearly 3,000 people at Utah Valley University when the bullet struck his neck. Death was nearly instantaneous, leaving no chance for intervention. His widow, Erica Kirk, later described the moment she first saw his body in the hospital.
His father recognized the recovered rifle as the same one gifted to his son years earlier. In interviews, Robinson's mother recounted how she first noticed the resemblance between the suspect's photo on the news and her son, prompting her to call him. This detail not only tied Robinson to the weapon, but also revealed how his own family played a pivotal role in pointing investigators toward him. Robinson's own text messages sealed the impression of premeditation. In one exchange with his roommate, who was also his romantic partner, he confessed to planning the shooting for a bit over a week. In another, he wrote, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." That language echoed his mother's recollections of him, dismissing Kirk as someone who spreads too much hate. When asked why he did it, Robinson explained, "There is too much evil, and the guy," referring to Charlie Kirk, "spreads too much hate." They talked about Robinson turning himself in and convinced Robinson to speak with a family friend who was a retired deputy sheriff. The consistency across his private messages and family conversations gave prosecutors a narrative thread. Robinson was not acting impulsively, but carrying out a deliberate mission. Combined with Discord chats, where he bragged about engraving the bullets and described leaving the rifle in a bush after the shooting, the case against him tightened with every digital artifact uncovered. Surveillance footage added a visual layer. Cameras around the campus recorded Robinson arriving hours before the event, wearing a maroon shirt, light-colored shorts, and a black hat. At one point, footage captured what prosecutors described as his unusual gait, possibly from concealing the long rifle under his clothing. Later, clips showed him in the prone position on the rooftop, then fleeing through the woods carrying the weapon. Another camera caught him dropping an item consistent with the rifle before changing clothes. It was a meticulous breadcrumb trail, captured not by witnesses, but by the university's digital eyes. All of this built toward the courtroom drama that was already beginning to unfold. Robinson's first court appearance came on September 16th, just days after his arrest. He appeared virtually, wearing an anti-suicide smock, and entered no plea. The Utah County Attorney's Office announced 7 charges: aggravated murder, 2 counts of felony discharge of a firearm, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and 2 additional counts tied to evidence concealment. Prosecutors declared their intent to seek the death penalty, framing the assassination as both a political act and an attack on free speech. This was an American tragedy, Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray said, a targeted killing of a man, for his words. Yet not everyone was satisfied with how evidence was being handled. Online commentators questioned why the shooting site was paved over so quickly, and why no autopsy details were released publicly. These discrepancies sparked conspiracy theories, but prosecutors remained focused on the sheer weight of forensic proof. Their message was simple: the evidence was more than enough to move forward. Still, Robinson's defense signaled it would not be a simple trial. His attorney requested more time to comb through what she described as voluminous discovery, including digital logs, ballistics reports, and hours of footage. She hinted at challenging eyewitness contradictions and even ballistics, suggesting that some accounts of the shooting didn't perfectly align. It was the first sign that, despite the overwhelming evidence, the trial could stretch into years of argument and appeal. But the weapon itself remained the centerpiece, a relic from the trenches of World War I, now central to a courtroom in Utah. Prosecutors emphasized its symbolism, a tool once used in global conflicts, repurposed for an act of ideological violence in America. They noted how Robinson's own father recognized the rifle immediately from images released by police. For him, it was a family gift, turned into an instrument of tragedy. And, when pressed by his wife Amber, he agreed. It looked like their son in the surveillance stills and like the same rifle once displayed in their home. Robinson's father reported that when his wife showed him the surveillance image of the suspected shooter in the news, he agreed that it looked like their son. He also believed that the rifle that police suspected the shooter used matched a rifle that was given to his son as a gift. As the court proceedings advanced, the story of the rifle only grew stranger. In hearings, prosecutors emphasized how the Mauser's archaic design had, paradoxically, made it more dangerous in Robinson's hands. It was slow to fire compared to modern semi-automatics. Investigators testified that the rooftop vantage point allowed Robinson to use that precision, firing from well over 150 yards away with a single fatal strike. This was not spray-and-pray violence. It was carefully aimed, almost clinical in its execution. But perhaps the most striking revelation came from Robinson's roommate and romantic partner, testifying under subpoena. He told investigators that Robinson had written a note declaring his intent to kill Kirk, and that he had destroyed it after photographing it. He also admitted to knowing about the engraved bullets, and even discussed them with Robinson on Discord, where Robinson joked about the absurdity of carving memes into ammunition. That testimony gave prosecutors their clearest timeline: the note, the week of planning, the engraving, the rooftop setup, and the aftermath of discarding the rifle. In the media, the case was framed as both shocking and inevitable. Commentators pointed to Robinson's online radicalization, the heirloom rifle turned weapon, and the chilling precision of the attack. On social media, clips of Erica's memorial speech circulated widely, especially her words of forgiveness. That young man on the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him for them. Those words captured the tragedy's duality: loss and grace, grief and resilience.
The preliminary hearing set for October 30th promised to draw even more national attention. The state was pursuing the death penalty, defense lawyers were preparing challenges, and Erica Kirk was becoming a public face of the case. Forensic experts lined up to testify about DNA traces, ballistic trajectories, and rooftop impressions. And through it all, the murder weapon loomed as the centerpiece. When Tyler Robinson was arrested, the story initially appeared straightforward. Investigators had the weapon, the DNA, the digital evidence, and the surveillance. But as details emerged, the investigation quickly turned into something far more complicated. Behind the forensics was a family divided, a community struggling to process betrayal, and an unfolding narrative where every testimony seemed to introduce another twist. Twists and turns in investigations. The first unexpected turn came from Robinson's own parents. It wasn't the police who first tied him to the shooting. It was his family. His mother, Amber, explained in an interview that the day after the assassination, she recognized the shooter's blurry photo on the evening news. The figure looked disturbingly familiar. She described the moment as surreal, disbelief and suspicion colliding in the span of seconds. Robinson's mother stated the following to police. On September 11th, 2025, the day after the shooting, Robinson's mother saw the photo of the shooter in the news and thought the shooter looked like her son. Robinson's mother called her son and asked him where he was. He said he was at home sick, and that he had also been at home sick on September 10th. This detail shifted the story from a faceless crime to a deeply personal tragedy. The parents, who had gifted their son the weapon years earlier, were now the ones identifying it in the hands of their child. And the contradictions did not stop there. Amber later recalled that her son seemed calm when she asked him about the shooting. He insisted he had been homesick, denying any involvement. Yet just days later, prosecutors revealed his roommate had supplied police with the incriminating note, the Discord messages, and details about the engraved bullets. Yet prosecutors began to lay out their timeline. Contradictions surfaced, while the defense suggested eyewitnesses gave conflicting accounts of where the shooter was positioned. Investigators remained adamant they had DNA on the rifle, surveillance footage, rooftop impressions, and even the handwritten note. But the public couldn't ignore how much of the case had hinged on Robinson's own family turning him in. The irony was sharp. The same parents who had once given him the rifle as a gift were now testifying that they recognized it in the evidence photos. Even Robinson's explanation for his actions seemed to blur the lines between sincerity and absurdity. In one digital message, he described carving memes into bullets as a big joke. In another, he spoke with deadly seriousness about Kirk's hatred. Prosecutors argued that this inconsistency reflected the internet-driven culture of irony and violence, where joking and meaning often collapsed into the same act. As more details came out, what initially seemed like an ironclad case became a narrative riddled with human contradictions. Parents, forced to choose between loyalty and truth, a roommate caught between love and betrayal, and a widow left to interpret her husband's death as both martyrdom and murder. The twists weren't in the evidence itself. It remained overwhelming, but in how the human stories collided around it, and those collisions only deepened as the preliminary hearing approached. The digital footprint left by Tyler Robinson became one of the most revealing elements of the investigation. Beyond the weapon and physical forensics, prosecutors showed that Robinson had documented his planning in ways that left no room for doubt. The Discord chats painted a more erratic portrait. In these online exchanges, Robinson joked about engraving bullets, called it mostly a big meme, and described his decision to leave the rifle in the woods. Investigators showed how these posts aligned perfectly with the physical evidence, the engraved cartridges, the abandoned rifle, and the forensic trails. Yet these same chats gave defense attorneys an opening. They argued that Robinson's tone in Discord, half joking, half serious, suggested immaturity rather than clear intent. Neighbors added more contradictions. Some described him as polite, quiet, and hardworking.
I'm desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and doing everything they can to score political points from it. Kimmel's framing reflected a broader, liberal response, condemning the killing while also urging audiences to consider the environment that made such violence possible for some. His words were seen as empathetic. For others, they were viewed as opportunistic, using tragedy to score political points. Meanwhile, Erica Kirk continued to guide the emotional response among supporters. Her speeches emphasized forgiveness, faith, and resilience. At a candlelight vigil, she said, "Hello. God bless all of you for coming here from all over the world to honor and celebrate my Charlie. Just a few miles from here, 2 years ago, at America Fest 2023, Charlie Kirk delivered a speech on stage for our TP USA Faith event. That message, so different from the fury erupting online, stood out. It reframed the tragedy as not only a political event, but a test of the values Charlie had preached. Media outlets across the spectrum picked up on Erica's tone. Conservative commentators praised her strength and urged followers to honor Charlie by carrying forward his fight. Progressive outlets, meanwhile, highlighted the irony that a man whose rhetoric, often polarized, was being remembered by his widow in terms of unity and forgiveness. Contrast became a point of debate in itself, showing how even grief could be filtered through partisan lenses. The first wave of community response revealed a theme that would only deepen over time. This was not just a criminal case, it was a cultural flashpoint, forcing people on all sides to confront how political speech, digital irony, and violence had collided in the real world. And for Erica, Owens, Kimmel, and thousands of strangers online, the question became not just why it happened, but what it meant for the future of American discourse. In Congress, Senator Ted Cruz pressed FBI Director Chris Patel on whether others had advanced knowledge of Robinson's plans. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. He was assassinated because of his political views. We're living in a time of enormous division and, tragically, hatred. And hatred that manifested in evil that we saw last week. Now, the FBI, working in concert with state and local law enforcement, apprehended what appears to be, in all likelihood, the murderer. And you did so in just 33 hours. It wasn't just about the killing anymore. It was about what Robinson represented. A young man radicalized by the currents of America's polarized politics, who crossed the ultimate line and then flaunted it in front of the world. As the weeks unfolded, the community response did not soften. It hardened. The immediate grief and shock gave way to polarizing narratives, each side using Charlie Kirk's assassination to reinforce its own worldview. On Reddit, the polarization was visible in real time. Threads in conservative communities honored Kirk as a martyr, sharing his speeches and branding his death as a warning. In progressive spaces, debates raged over whether Kirk's rhetoric had fueled division and whether his assassin's motives, though inexcusable, reflected deeper cultural tensions. The most upvoted comment in one political subreddit read, "Kirk's killer should be punished to the fullest extent, but we cannot ignore that our culture has turned disagreement into dehumanization." Quora threads reflected a similar divide, but in longer, more thoughtful essays. One widely circulated answer argued that Charlie Kirk's assassination shows that the line between political performance and real-world consequence has evaporated. Another countered that Kirk should not be canonized, writing, "Martyrs are made by the narratives we create. Whether you loved him or hated him, don't pretend he wasn't a polarizing figure." The responses showed how, even in grief, interpretation became political. Mainstream media coverage mirrored these online debates. On Fox News, segments emphasized the ideological nature of the attack, framing it as part of a larger campaign of hostility toward conservatives. On CNN, coverage focused more on the investigation, the forensics, and the broader cultural questions around internet radicalization. The contrast was striking. The same event, told with two entirely different emphases. And for viewers, it only deepened the sense that Kirk's death was not a shared tragedy, but another chapter in America's ongoing division. In digital spaces, this blurring became the most hotly debated theme. Was Robinson radicalized by ideology, or was he simply lost in an online culture where irony collapses into reality? On Reddit, some argued that he had been terminally online, unable to distinguish memes from morals. On Quora, others countered that the ideology was real and the memes were simply camouflage. The investigation showed Robinson had admitted both interpretations at different times, leaving communities to argue endlessly about which version of him was true. As weeks turned into months, the initial shock of Charlie Kirk's murder gave way to long-term questions. What did his death mean for political discourse, his family, for a country already fractured by division? The answers didn't come neatly. They came in competing narratives, each carving its own meaning into a tragedy that remained raw. The trial over Charlie Kirk's assassination is still unfolding, leaving the whole nation tense as people wait for the final verdict. Each testimony and piece of evidence only makes the case more puzzling, fueling fiery debates inside and outside the courtroom. The decision could change everything, and no one can look away. What do you think drove the killer? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to check the cards on screen for more mystery deep dives.